Hello, and welcome to the Mythic Archive. Today, we enter the mist-shrouded lands of Albion. We are going to tell the story of the once and future king, King Arthur. But the story of the greatest king does not begin with nobility. It begins with lust and deception. Uther Pendragon, the High King of Britain, fell in love with Igraine, the wife of his enemy, the Duke of Cornwall. Uther was obsessed. He could not eat. He could not sleep. He turned to his advisor, the druid wizard Merlin. Merlin agreed to help Uther, but for a terrible price. "I will use my magic," Merlin said. "I will give you the face of the Duke. You will walk into Tintagel Castle and Igraine will believe you are her husband. You will sleep with her, but the child born of that night belongs to me." Uther agreed. He traded his firstborn for one night of passion. That night, Arthur was conceived in a bed of lies. When the baby was born, Merlin appeared. He took the child away from his weeping mother and gave him to a humble knight, Sir Ector, to be raised as a common squire. The heir to the throne was hidden in plain sight. Uther died. The kingdom fell into chaos. Barons and warlords fought for the crown. England bled. Finally, Merlin sent a message to all the lords to gather in London on Christmas Day. In the churchyard, a miracle appeared. A square block of marble, and upon it an anvil, and stuck through the anvil was a naked sword. Written in gold letters were the words, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is right-wise king born of all England." The greatest knights tried. They pulled until their muscles tore. They could not move it a millimeter. It was stuck fast by the will of God. Arthur was there, but only as a squire to his foster brother Kay. Kay had forgotten his sword at the inn and sent Arthur to get it. The inn was locked. Arthur, not wanting his brother to be unarmed at the tournament, saw the sword in the churchyard. He didn't read the writing. He just thought, "That looks like a good sword." He walked up to the stone. He grabbed the hilt, and with the ease of pulling a knife from butter, he drew the sword. He brought it to Kay. When the lords saw the boy holding the sword, they refused to believe it. They made him put it back. He pulled it out again and again. Finally, the people cried out, "We will have Arthur for our king." The boy became the monarch. But a sword from a stone does not make a king invincible. Arthur was young and rash. He challenged a mighty king named Pellinore, who had set up a pavilion by the road and fought anyone who passed. Arthur charged him. They fought on horseback until their spears shattered. They fought on foot with swords. Pellinore was stronger. He struck Arthur's sword so hard that the blade from the stone snapped in two. Arthur was disarmed. Pellinore raised his sword to cut off Arthur's head. The legend would have ended there, but Merlin intervened. He cast a spell of sleep on Pellinore. "You would kill the hope of Britain," Merlin said. He saved Arthur, but the sword of his birthright was broken. Arthur was a king without a weapon. He felt ashamed. "Do not worry," Merlin said. "There is another sword, a sword not of this earth." Merlin led Arthur to a lake of deep, still water. It was the entrance to Avalon, the other world. In the center of the lake, an arm rose from the water. It was clothed in white samite, mystic and wonderful. In its hand it held a sword that shone with the light of 30 torches. "That is the Lady of the Lake," Merlin whispered. A beautiful woman walked on the water to meet them. She told Arthur he could have the sword, but he must promise to give her a gift when she asked for it later. Arthur agreed. He rode out and took the sword. This was Excalibur. It was the cutter of steel. But as they rode back, Merlin asked Arthur a trick question. "Which do you like better, the sword or the scabbard?" Arthur, being a warrior, said, "The sword, of course." Merlin shook his head. "You are a fool. The scabbard is worth 10 of the sword. For as long as you wear the scabbard, you will never bleed, no matter how many wounds you take." It was a prophecy of Arthur's doom. He would one day lose the scabbard, and on that day he would fall. Arthur secured his borders. He defeated the rebel kings. Now he needed peace. His advisors told him to marry. He chose Guinevere, the daughter of King Leodegrance. Merlin warned him against it. "She is the fairest lady living," the wizard said, "but she will bring the end of your kingdom. She will love Lancelot, and Lancelot will love her." But Arthur was in love, and he ignored the warning. As a wedding gift, King Leodegrance gave Arthur a massive table. It was round. This was a revolutionary concept in medieval hierarchy. At a square table, there is a head and a foot. There is status. At a round table, all knights are equal. They look each other in the eye. 150 seats. One seat, the Siege Perilous, was left empty, waiting for the perfect knight who would one day achieve the Holy Grail. Camelot was born. It was a golden age of chivalry, tournaments, and justice. But beneath the gold, a rot was spreading. This is the chapter that most modern retellings leave out, because it turns Arthur into a villain. Before he married Guinevere, Arthur had slept with a woman who turned out to be his half-sister, Morgus. From this incestuous union, a child was conceived. Merlin prophesied that a boy born on May Day would destroy the kingdom. Arthur, terrified for his crown, committed an atrocity that rivals King Herod. He ordered that all noble children born on May Day be gathered up. He put them on a ship. He sent the ship out to sea without a crew, intending for them to drown. The ship crashed against the rocks. Almost all the children died, but one survived. A baby named Mordred washed ashore and was found by a fisherman. Arthur had tried to cheat fate by killing the innocent, but he only succeeded in staining his soul. His son survived, growing up in the shadows, hating the father who tried to drown him. While Mordred grew up, another threat emerged from Arthur's own blood. His half-sister, Morgan le Fay. She was a sorceress, a student of Merlin, and she hated Arthur with a cold passion. Arthur, naive and trusting, gave her Excalibur and its magical scabbard for safekeeping. It was a fatal mistake. Morgan had a lover named Sir Accolon. She wanted Accolon to be king. She made a copy of Excalibur, a brittle replica that looked identical. She gave the fake to Arthur and the real sword to Accolon. She then manipulated events to trap them in a dungeon and force them to fight a duel to the death, neither knowing who the other was. It was a plot of Machiavellian brilliance. Arthur and Accolon met in the field. Arthur fought with the fake sword. He struck Accolon, but the blade would not bite. Meanwhile, Accolon struck Arthur with the real Excalibur. The magic blade cut through Arthur's armor like paper. Blood poured from the king. He was losing. He was dying. He struck one final desperate blow, and his fake sword shattered at the hilt. He stood defenseless. Accolon raised Excalibur to kill the king, but the Lady of the Lake, Nimue, was watching. She knew that Morgan's treachery could not be allowed to stand. She used her magic to loosen the sword from Accolon's grip. The sword flew from his hand. Arthur leaped forward. He grabbed it. He felt the true steel. He recognized his own weapon. In a fury, he struck Accolon down. He survived, but Morgan stole the scabbard, the sheath that prevented bleeding, and threw it into a lake. Arthur would never be invincible again. He was now a mortal king, vulnerable to every cut. Before the tragedy could fully unfold, Arthur lost his greatest protector. Merlin, the prophet who lived backward in time, knew his end was coming. He fell in love. It was a foolish, desperate love of an old man for a young woman. Her name was Nimue, or Vivian in some texts, one of the ladies of the lake. Merlin taught her all his secrets. He taught her how to warp reality and how to trap a man forever. He knew she would use it against him, but he could not stop himself. One day in the forest of Broceliande, Nimue grew tired of his advances. While Merlin slept under a hawthorn tree, she cast the very spell he had taught her. She wove a tower of air around him. It was invisible but impenetrable. Merlin woke up to find himself buried alive, not in earth but in magic. He could see out, but no one could hear him. He was trapped for eternity. Arthur was now alone. The age of magic was ending. The age of men, with all their flaws, had begun. Into this vacuum stepped a new hero, a young prince from France named Lancelot du Lac. He was the son of King Ban, but he had been raised by the Lady of the Lake in her underwater kingdom. He was not just a warrior, he was a force of nature. He arrived at Camelot and immediately proved himself to be the best knight in the world. He was invincible in the joust, he was gentle to ladies, he was the embodiment of chivalry. Arthur loved him. He made Lancelot his champion, his right hand, his best friend. Lancelot loved Arthur in return. He swore to defend the king with his life. But there was one person Lancelot loved more, and that was the Queen. It started as courtly love. Lancelot dedicated his victories to Guinevere. He fought for her honor. But the proximity was dangerous. They were the two most beautiful people in the kingdom, and they were drawn together like magnets. The tragedy of Lancelot is that he tried to be good. He tried to stay away. He went on endless quests just to avoid being near her. But fate always brought him back. Eventually, the line was crossed. The spiritual love became physical. They began an affair that would rot the foundations of the Round Table. It was not a sordid fling. It was a profound, soul-shattering love, which makes it all the more tragic. Everyone in the court began to whisper. The only person who didn't know or perhaps refused to see was Arthur. He trusted them both too much to believe it. The tension in the court exploded during a dinner party. Queen Guinevere gave a dinner for the knights. A knight named Sir Pinel, who hated Gawain, poisoned an apple intended for him. But another knight, the innocent Sir Patrice, ate it instead. He fell down dead, swelling up and bursting. The court was horrified. They accused the queen of treason and murder. By the laws of the time, Guinevere was sentenced to burn at the stake unless a champion could defeat her accuser in combat. But the knights were angry at her. They believed she was guilty. No one would fight for her. Arthur, as the judge, could not fight. He sat on his throne, weeping, watching his wife being dragged to the fire. At the last second, a knight in white armor rode in. It was Lancelot. He fought the accuser. He won. He saved the queen's life. But this act of heroism only deepened their bond and confirmed the suspicions of the court. Lancelot was the only one who would die for her. The noose was tightening. Just when the moral rot began to set in, God offered Camelot a chance at redemption. It was the Feast of Pentecost. The knights were gathered at the round table. Suddenly a crack of thunder shook the castle. A beam of sunlight 7 times brighter than noon pierced the hall. In that light floated the sangreal, the Holy Grail, the cup used at the Last Supper, the vessel that caught the blood of Christ. It was covered in white samite, but its presence filled the hall with the smells of the finest spices and meats. Every knight saw his companions looking more beautiful than they had ever been. Then it vanished. The silence was broken by Sir Gawain. He stood up and swore a vow. "I shall labor in the quest of the sangreal," he declared, "for a year and a day, or until I see it openly." One by one the other knights stood and swore. 150 knights pledged themselves to the quest. King Arthur wept. He knew what this meant. "You have bereft me of the fairest fellowship that ever was," he told Gawain. He knew that most of them would never return. The brotherhood was breaking apart. The quest for the Grail was a spiritual filter. It destroyed the wicked and humbled the proud. Lancelot, the greatest knight, rode out expecting to win, but he failed. He found a chapel where the Grail was kept, but an invisible force held him back. A voice told him that his love for Guinevere was a sin that barred him from the holy mysteries. He was the greatest worldly knight, but he was spiritually bankrupt. The only one who could achieve the Grail was Galahad. Galahad was Lancelot's son, born of a trick, but he possessed a purity his father lacked. Galahad sat in the Siege Perilous without dying. He found the Grail. He looked into the cup and saw the infinite. And having seen perfection, he chose not to return to the sorrowful world. His soul was taken up to heaven. The best of the knights died of holiness. The rest returned to Camelot, broken, humbled, and fewer in number. The quest had hollowed out the round table. With the quest over, the old habits returned. Lancelot, having failed to find God, went back to the Queen. But this time, they were being watched. Mordred, Arthur's bastard son, and Agravain, Gawain's brother, hated Lancelot. They wanted to destroy the king by destroying his heart. They laid a trap. They told Arthur to go hunting for the night. They knew Lancelot would visit the queen. That night, while Lancelot was in the queen's bedchamber, 14 armed knights surrounded the door. Mordred shouted, "Traitor knight, Sir Lancelot, now thou art taken." Inside, Lancelot and Guinevere were terrified. Lancelot had no armor. He had only his sword and his cloak. He was trapped like a rat. Guinevere wept, knowing that this was the end. She would be burned for treason. But Lancelot kissed her one last time. "I shall sell my life as dearly as I may," he said. Lancelot unbarred the door just enough for one man to enter. Sir Colgrevance, a large knight, rushed in. Lancelot deflected his blow, killed him with a single stroke, and dragged his body inside. He quickly put on Colgrevance's armor. Now armed, Lancelot opened the door wide and charged. It was a slaughter. Lancelot was the greatest warrior in the world, and he was fighting for his life and his love. He killed Agravain. He killed 12 knights. Only Mordred, wounded and cowardly, ran away to tell the tale. Lancelot turned to the queen. He offered to take her with him, but Guinevere refused. She believed the law might still protect her, or perhaps she simply couldn't bear to run. Lancelot fled into the night, promising to return if she was condemned, and condemned she was. Arthur returned to find his knights dead and the treason exposed. By the law of the land, the queen had to burn. The day of the execution arrived. Queen Guinevere was led out to the stake in her white shift. She was stripped of her crown and jewels. A priest heard her confession. King Arthur could not bear to watch. The chronicles say he sat in his tower and wept. He ordered his nephews, Gareth and Gaheris, to guard the execution. But Gareth and Gaheris loved Lancelot. They refused to wear armor. They stood by the stake in mourning robes, unarmed, protesting the sentence. The torch was lit. The fire began to crackle, and then the thunder of hooves shook the ground. Lancelot arrived. He was not alone. He brought his kin. They charged the square like wolves. Lancelot was in a blind frenzy. He hacked through the guards. He cut the chains. He threw the queen onto his horse. He had saved her. But in the smoke and the confusion, Lancelot struck out at anyone standing in his way. When the dust settled, the cost of the rescue was revealed. Lying dead in the square were Gareth and Gaheris, the king's nephews, Gawain's brothers, the very men who had refused to wear armor because they respected Lancelot too much to fight him. Lancelot, in his blindness, had killed the people who loved him most. When Gawain heard the news, he fainted. When he woke up, the noble, courteous Gawain was gone. In his place was an avenging angel. He marched to the king. "My king, my uncle," Gawain said. "I forgave Lancelot when he slept with the queen. I forgave him when he killed Agravain, but now he has slaughtered my unarmed brothers. I will never rest until one of us is dead." The Round Table was shattered. It was no longer a kingdom of justice. It was a blood feud. Arthur was forced to gather his army and besiege Lancelot in his castle, Joyous Gard. The siege lasted for months. Lancelot was reluctant to fight. He still loved Arthur. Every time Arthur rode near the walls, Lancelot ordered his men not to shoot. He even rescued Arthur when the king was unhorsed in a skirmish, putting him back on his saddle. "My lord," Lancelot said, "I will never kill you." But Gawain would not listen. He stood at the gate every day, calling Lancelot a traitor, a coward, and a murderer. Finally, the Pope intervened. He sent a bishop with a bull of excommunication, unless Arthur took back the queen and made peace. Arthur agreed to take Guinevere back, but he banished Lancelot to France. The war moved across the sea. Gawain forced Arthur to follow Lancelot to France to finish the job. They left England defenseless, and they left the one man in charge who should never have been trusted. Arthur appointed Mordred as regent while he was away. It was the mistake that ended the world. As soon as Arthur was gone, Mordred made his move. He forged letters from France claiming that Arthur was dead. He summoned the barons and declared himself king. He was crowned at Canterbury. To seal his claim, he tried to marry his stepmother, Guinevere. It was an act of ultimate incest and power. Guinevere, showing a sudden flash of political brilliance, pretended to agree. She asked to go to London to buy wedding clothes. Once there, she locked herself in the Tower of London and refused to come out. Mordred besieged the tower with cannons and engines of war. He threatened to kill her. But then news arrived. The true king was not dead. Arthur was coming home. He was landing at Dover with a vengeful army. The final battle was at hand. Arthur landed at Dover. Mordred tried to stop him on the beach, but Arthur's rage was unstoppable. He pushed Mordred back, but the victory came at a terrible price. Sir Gawain, the king's nephew, was struck on the old wound that Lancelot had given him in France. He knew he was dying, and in his final moments, the madness of vengeance lifted. He realized that his pride had destroyed the kingdom. He asked for paper and ink. He wrote a letter to Lancelot. "Flower of all noble knights," he wrote, "I beg you, return to this realm and rescue the king. I die from the wound you gave me, and I forgive you." He died at noon. Arthur wept over him. The spirit of the Round Table died with Gawain. Arthur pushed Mordred back to the west, towards Salisbury Plain. The night before the final battle, Arthur had a nightmare. He saw himself sitting on a chair tied to a wheel. The wheel turned, and he fell into deep black water filled with serpents and worms. Then the ghost of Gawain appeared to him, surrounded by the ladies he had fought for. "Do not fight tomorrow," the ghost warned. "If you fight Mordred tomorrow, you will die and your army will be destroyed. Make a treaty. Delay for a month. Lancelot is coming." Arthur woke up terrified. He called his last loyal knights, Lucan and Guinevere. He told them to negotiate a truce with Mordred at any cost. The two armies met at Camlann. Arthur and Mordred met in the middle to sign the treaty. Both sides were on edge. They had given orders to their men. If you see a single sword drawn, attack. The treaty was agreed upon. Wine was poured. It seemed peace was possible. But fate, or perhaps the curse of the May Day babies, intervened. An adder, a small poisonous snake, slithered out of a bush and stung a knight on the foot. The knight, acting on instinct, drew his sword to kill the snake. The sun flashed on the steel. Both armies saw the drawn sword. They blew the trumpets. They shouted, "Treason!" The battle began. It was a battle caused by an accident. A battle that should never have happened. They fought all day. It was a slaughter. Father killed son. Brother killed brother. By sunset, there were only 4 men left standing on the entire plain: King Arthur, Sir Bedivere, Sir Lucan, and Mordred. Arthur saw his son standing among a heap of dead men. "Give me my spear," Arthur said to Lucan. "I will kill this traitor." Lucan begged him to remember the dream, to walk away. But Arthur would not listen. He ran at Mordred. He drove his spear through Mordred's chest, piercing the lung. But Mordred did not die instantly. In a final act of hate, he pushed his own body up the shaft of the spear, pulling himself closer to his father. With his last ounce of strength, Mordred swung his sword with 2 hands. He struck Arthur on the side of the helmet. The sword cut through the steel and into the brain pan. Mordred fell dead. Arthur fell, mortally wounded. Arthur was dying. He commanded Bedivere to take Excalibur and throw it into the nearby lake. Bedivere tried twice to hide the sword, unable to throw away such beauty, but Arthur shamed him. On the 3rd time, Bedivere threw it. An arm rose from the water, caught the sword, brandished it 3 times, and vanished. The contract was fulfilled. Then a barge appeared, covered in black cloth. Inside were 3 queens in mourning hoods. Morgan le Fay was among them, finally reconciled with her brother in death. They placed Arthur in the boat. "I go to the Vale of Avalon," Arthur whispered, "to heal me of my grievous wound." The boat drifted into the mist. Some say he died and was buried at Glastonbury, but the legend says he did not die. He sleeps in a hollow hill, waiting for the day when Britain needs him most. He is Rex Quandam, Rexque Futuris, the once and future king.